Welcome to the Lake Mills City Council meeting of December 17th, 2024. This is our last meeting this year, so thank you to everyone for making it through 2024. And Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. So we'll come back in January. All right. Can we have roll call, please?
Ms. Curler? Here. Ms. Schmager?
Here.
Ms. Quidno?
Here.
Mr. Fields?
Here.
Mr. Waters?
Here.
Thank you.
All right, so I'm running the meeting tonight because Ms. Curler's home under the weather a little bit today, so I'm stepping in, and hopefully she gets better soon. So she's still going to be an active participant tonight. Sounds like her voice is a little rough, but we'll work with it. So, all right, let's stand up and do the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
I
pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you. So next on the agenda is the council member board reports and acceptance of meeting minutes from the Planning Commission of August 27th and the City Council of December 3rd. Any comments? No. Seeing none, I'll accept those into our minutes. Next on our agenda is the Joint Rock Lake Committee monthly report. That report was actually forwarded to us by email. I think everybody received that. And is there any questions on that report? Yep. Yes.
I have a question. The report referenced the minutes that were from the last town board meeting, but they were not posted online. So I'm wondering if there's a way that we can obtain those so we understand what was proposed.
I don't believe they post them online until they've been approved by the town board.
Which would be after the next meeting.
Correct.
So, okay, it was just referenced, so I
think they
felt like
should.
we were out
I
of.
think they'll appear shortly, but I believe they post them after they're official.
I'll send Ms. Davies a note on that and ask her if she could copy us on the recommendation.
Thank you.
Does that work?
That would be awesome.
Okay, thank you.
And Greg,
Questions? Yeah.
just information, because I talked to Wendy today, and she filed that report, and they'll be presenting their recommendations to the town board at the town's first meeting in January. So
Oh, January.
that will be when they'll be officially presenting it to the town.
Oh, that's good. Thank you for the clarification.
All right, so if we can make that note part of our public record, we'll move forward. Correspondence from any correspondence received by city council members? Ms. Quidno.
I received emails regarding the resolution 24-77 insurance claim issuance. The town board comments regarding the Vanguard proposal, about 3 emails regarding the Vanguard proposal, 3 emails regarding Sandy Beach and what we'll be talking about on Thursday, and then the Joint Rock Lake Committee report that we just talked about.
Okay. Great. How about you, Steve?
I had, I believe, all the similar ones that Michelle just had, but I also had one, somebody asking about the date we're going to see the Vanguard proposal, and also one email on winter parking ordinance.
All right. Lisa, did you have anything?
Yeah, I also got a couple of emails about winter parking regulations, in addition to the items that Michelle mentioned. Drake and I attended a legislative breakfast hosted by Jefferson County, where the county shared some of their priorities with federal and state and legislators. And so that was really interesting. And one of the short-term, I think, priorities for the county is going to be to look at EMS and maybe form a work group. So I think that's of interest to our community as well. And then yesterday I attended the last meeting of the Ad Hoc Urban Forest Committee. So they're finishing up, they have finished up their work products, and they'll be, their chair, Jeanette Heitman, will be presenting that at our January 7th meeting.
All right. Thank you. Mary?
I received identical correspondence, and in addition, also received a correspondence on ice skating on the Mill Pond, which I brought forward to the Parks Board.
All right, and I don't have anything in addition, so we'll keep moving. Next is questions and public comment. So the public is encouraged to address the council at this time regarding items on the agenda. Public comment may also be made at this time on items that are not on the agenda if you've registered with the city clerk before the meeting has been called to order. The state's open meeting laws discourage action by the council on items not listed on the agenda. Please keep your comments limited to 3 minutes and state your name and address when starting your comments, and fill out the sign-in sheet provided. So public comment is now open.
Chris Lopak, 419 Campus Street, here again to talk about my resolution that was also mentioned in the emails. I'm here to once again ask for you to please reconsider my claim where a city tree fell onto a city power line, which then ripped another city power line back to my house, causing damage. After the last city council meeting, Lisa, you stated the council voted to disallow the claim against the city as recommended by the city's insurer. I found that verbiage alarming and disheartening as the city insurer consistently reiterated how it could provide facts for you, the city council, to review and reconsider any decision of disallowance. But you are basing your decision completely off his determination, ignoring all facts that I have shared. Facts like the tree was never being pruned, evaluated, didn't even exist in the database to be monitored. The trees showed rotten areas, as mentioned in the pictures. Another power line goes through another tree, and that this type of tree is known for doing this splitting. It's almost as if there is no real process for citizens to have an opportunity to proceed with any claim other than legally. The entire situation is the typical insurance game plan: delay, deny, defend. For 2 months, my claim was delayed. A lot of back and forth with different folks in this room. I filed the claim within hours based off of our city's own forester seeing the damage and telling me to do so. For 2 months, the city and insurer delayed a decision and drew this out, only to deny right before a city council meeting, and now we're on month 3. Delay, deny, defend. I've been told by the insurer and our city's attorney that discretionary immunity covers the city, but that's not always the case. Thompson versus the city of Milwaukee, the plaintiff filed a lawsuit against the city, alleging that the city was negligent in maintaining a city-owned tree that fell. Another case in Wisconsin here included the court noting that governmental immunity could be overcome if the claimant could show gross negligence. The underlying theme in these is ministerial duty. In cases where the city has a clear established duty to inspect or maintain trees, such as when city codes or regulations require tree maintenance, this is usually considered ministerial act, not a discretionary act. Ministerial acts are not protected by discretionary immunity. Additionally, known dangerous conditions. If the city is aware, or should have been aware, that a tree was a hazard, then in fact, the city can be held liable for negligence. The city's own chapter 594-2 regarding powers and duties and 594-6 tree removal clearly outline the failure to inspect this tree as ministerial, and one might say flat out negligent. Lastly, I did speak with a neighbor recently in my community who informed me a similar situation happened before I moved to Lake Mills, where a city-owned tree fell across the street and took out his fence and another's porch, and the city flat out took care of it. The same state statute was in place for all of these instances. So I'm asking for you to please reconsider my claim. I hope you all have a Merry Christmas, and I'm happy to come back in January to discuss again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dear City Council members, my name is Beth Naughton, and I live at W7898 County Road B, across from Tyranina Park. Thank you for allowing public comment tonight. As a member of Concerned Citizens of Lake Mills, I'm speaking tonight to express my deep concern about the proposed zoning change and large multifamily apartment complex on County Road B. This project threatens to disrupt the historical integrity of Lake Mills. The introduction of a large apartment complex in this location will exacerbate traffic congestion and cause significant safety concerns, impacting the quality of life for area residents. Disturbing the former dump site is very risky and will potentially cause harm to the neighbors of the property. I urge you to carefully consider these factors and prioritize preserving our community's character. The Lake Mills Plan Commission recognized the negatives of this proposal and is recommending that the council not change the zoning. A Plan Commission member that did vote to rezone the property was asked why they voted yes to rezoning the parcel. It was reported that their answer was that they felt an obligation to the property owner. What about any obligation to the homeowners anywhere near the site in question? As for the owner of the property, page 9 of the 394-page 2019 DNR report about the parcel in question clearly showed that the owner signed off on and was well aware of both the contaminated soil and groundwater on this site. There are many challenges with developing such a property. However, there are numerous options for our community members to work together to make the landowner whole financially without building this monstrous apartment complex. Let us work together to find solutions that respect all residents of Lake Mills and balance our community needs. Thank you.
Is there any other public comment tonight? And online, nothing there. All right, so public comments closed. Moving forward, city manager's report. Mr. Daly?
If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Otherwise, I have nothing further to report other than what's included in your packet.
Any questions for Mr. Daly?
I have a new comment.
Yes.
I'd like to make a comment. I just would like to say welcome to our newest officer, Skylar DeBlair. It was nice to see his face on the memo and the report, so appreciate that.
Anything further? All right, thank you. Next, council business. First on the agenda is a presentation on Mill Pond recommendations from the Park Board. I believe the chair of the Parks Board's here, Mr. Sprecher. Is it Sprecher? Yes.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to make this presentation. It will be fairly short, high level, in that the items were included in the agenda, and you are able to get to them on the city website and get some more details. But I'll give you a bit of background. We were given this task on last June 2023, and what we were asked to do was review short and long-term maintenance needs of the mill pond and to consider natural resource preservation and community recreation needs. So as part of this process, and Eric and myself and the board came up with this sort of chronologically. We got input from public members during 2 separate public hearings on both general mill pond renovations and recreational improvement priorities. We had Wisconsin DNR staff make presentations to the ecology and a bit of the history of the mill pond and other water bodies similar to the mill pond. And we had a presentation from the Jefferson County Land and Water Conservation Department staff, again talking about the flora, the fauna, the history, impacts to the mill pond regarding some of the proposals for dredging, some of the proposals for weed removal, and some other things that were, lack of a better term, high-ticket items. This is part of the proposal and options that we considered and the city citizens considered as to, do we want to go with a full scale dredging of the entire body of the mill pond, at least this water surface mill pond, and that was in the millions of dollars, down to basically doing nothing. So as we moved along, and the topics discussed as we went through the next year and a half, we did a historical overview of and photos of the mill pond, and that was provided by Mr. Snyder and Ms. Unz, and that was the one of the items that was included in the agenda. As you can see, it's been part of the city for over 100 years, and it is a precious resource that we want to, again, maintain and enhance if we can. We then talked about the dredging, the review, created the cost estimates considering inflation, and an opinion of probable construction costs was presented. The researched alternatives to dredging. And that was in June. In August, we had DNR representatives and Jefferson County Land and Water Conservation Department provide us more input on dredging. And they gave us information on the depth of the water, because a lot of the comments were that it was impassable or unusable. Also, part of the process was what was the cost to the city, what was the cost to the citizens, because we did have comments from the citizens saying, I'm paying these high taxes where we're not being able to use the water. The people from the DNR said they would be happy to talk to any of the citizens on the mill pond as to their own dredging, their own their own weed removal. So again, that was another reason for us in the Parks Board pretty much moving towards the recommendation to the city to not dredge, nor to, as a city, to do weed removal. So that just kind of moved on. And again, the major reasons as outlined in our included in the agenda report were the unpredictable long-term maintenance costs and longevity of any dredging, and then the whole process of just the cost of maintaining it. And if you look at the mill pond past, present, and future, some of the the lily pads and such that are in the mill pond have been there for a number of years and providing both shade for the mill pond and also for the fish and other creatures that inhabit that water space. So the next part of our process was the weed harvesting and cutting. And again, same thing, our research and our experts from the DNR and from the county recommended against removing any major amount of the aquatic vegetation, because that would damage the ecology for the creatures that are inhabiting the mill pond. So again, large-scale weed harvesting was not viable. And then in October, we had another public hearing held and on recreational improvements. And this is where we, as the Parks Board, have determined this would be where we think the city and should pursue. And that was the short term. We would ask that you do the non-motorized watercraft launch. We also said a seasonal kayak storage could be implemented, and kayak rentals could be implemented in 2025, because those are been successful for the city, and it goes to the goal of improving the recreational use of the mill pond. So those are short-term. Long-term recreational improvements would be the launch trailer parking to research as an option between the mill pond and the fire station. And we also expect further research on that as far as where we can have the parking without having impact of the city's fire service. We also asked for educational signage to be an ongoing project for both historical, environmental, and cultural significance to the mill pond. And that would be, again, to educate the people that are visiting the mill pond or using the mill pond. Also, there was a request for a boardwalk to be added. This is both historical. There used to be a boardwalk along the mill pond. And also, so that was something we would say the city could explore, and the amounts of cost for that would be forthcoming. So that's a high level of where we are. Again, the condensed version of this is the Parks Board recommends no dredging. The Parks Board recommends no large-scale weed removal, and the Parks Board recommends short-term and long-term pursuing of recreational opportunities for the mill pond. So with that, I'll entertain any questions if you have, or ones that I can answer now, I will. Anything else we'll take back to the board.
So before we get to comments, I have a question for staff real quick, okay?
I'm sorry?
I have a question for staff.
Yes.
There's an overwhelming smell right now. Those doors in the back are open. Would that help to close those by chance?
We can give it a shot.
Okay.
It might be coming from just below us because they
Yes.
waxed the
They
floors.
waxed the floors, yeah.
And it kind of is permeating through.
Thank you. All right, back to
It
business.
wasn't me, Greg, I
It
promise.
wasn't, no, it wasn't you, Tim.
Thanks, Tim. That was a nice presentation, by the way. Thank you for
Thank
the
you.
presentation. Quick question on the boardwalk. I believe there's some bridges maybe back there right now. I think that was an Eagle project done by Christopher Stiles, if I'm correct. Are those still in existence back in the back part of the Mill Pond area?
The answer, yes, kind of. And I don't know the last time, and Eric could probably speak to this, in that as Eric and I were preparing this overview, they were there, I've been on the board a long time, I think they've been there about 5 years or more. They basically have disintegrated, and I don't know the last time, Eric, I'll put it to you maybe. To answer your question, they're there, but they aren't very usable.
Okay. Yeah, that Eagle project was probably done 15 years ago.
Okay.
So,
See, that's the thing. Anything I do, I think I used to say double it when it comes to time. Now I'm getting to the age where I have to triple it. So my 5 years is 15, so thank you, Greg.
and this is your final report to council on this issue?
Our charge was to give a report every 6 months, so this would be our second report. If there's another one that would be asked, we can certainly do that. But at this point, we believe the major report and our recommendations are presented now.
Okay. Any other questions?
Lisa.
Ms.
Greg?
Curler, yes.
Thank you. First of all, thank you, Tim, for your presentation, and to the board for all its work on this. I think there was a lot of turnover on the board in the last year and a half, so Tim might have been one of the few constants in working on this, and so I really appreciate your diligence and gathering so much public input on different areas. I can comment on that boardwalk because I just walked back there Sunday when we were doing the Christmas bird count, and that there's pieces of boardwalk, but it's not one consistent area, so it kind of goes over the low spots that were wetter back in the day. But I definitely observed that it's not in the best repair, and there are other muddy spots, as you might expect, being right next to the marsh. So that might be a good project to improve the walkway area there. And I really like the recommendations for some of the non-motorized boating use. There's obviously a lot of interest in that, growing interest in the community, and that seems like a really good spot for it. One question I had, just procedurally, and maybe this is a question for Drake, if this is the kind of the final recommendations from the Parks Board, do we need to take any kind of formal action as a council, or can we just have Eric take it under advisement and bring forward projects based on those recommendations? What do we need to do to kind of close out the Parks Board work on this?
You don't need to take action tonight. I think that before Eric brings forward any projects related to the recommendations, we would want to know that there's council buy-in on the recommendations. So if there's interest from the council to discuss them further, if it's a strategic priority to implement them, whether in the capital budget or the operational budget, then that's something staff will want to know so that we can work towards that end.
Did you have a follow-up to that?
Well, just, I guess, speaking for myself then, in looking at the report, the short-term recommendations include some investment in kayak rental and related facilities in the next year, to include that in the capital improvement plan. And I personally would be very much in favor of that. The boardwalk, I'm guessing, would be a little bit more expensive and maybe would be a later investment. So I think it's a good idea, but I don't know where it fits in the priority or the timing.
Eric, I can't recall, are you implementing any kayak storage or rental out of your operational budget?
Yes.
So, Eric, Director Schreiner, has budget capacity in his opinion in order to pursue that change. And I think operationally, he's able to implement such a service. under the general direction of the Parks Board's recommendation. So it doesn't seem like you need to take any action on that one. I think the boardwalk certainly would is going to take funds that aren't currently budgeted within that operational budget. So may take either a capital budget request or if we so choose to pay for it out of operations, we'd have to prioritize that in a future budget.
If I can add on the boardwalk, that was in our long-term conversation. We are still working on a cost estimate, a game plan of what that would look like. There was a lot of enthusiasm from the DNR, possible grant opportunities, because we talked about it in the context of educational signage as well. And so I think that is, I would say, phase 2 for the Parks Board to continue discussing. But the short-term recreational improvements, as you read about and as Tim shared in his report, are the 3 items that the kayak storage, kayak rentals, and the ADA accessible non-motorized craft launch were the 3 items that on the short term were of strong interest, and we received some public input on, small number, but people who are interested in that launch as well.
So does it make sense to take these 3 short terms and put proposals together for council and then keep the long-term projects with the Parks Board to make further recommendations?
Yeah, and we can give you an update, a more formal update on what pieces of it the department believes it can implement without any new resources.
Okay.
Sure.
Does that make sense, everybody? I'm seeing head nods. All right. Anything else for Tim tonight?
One
right.
other, I
Yes.
guess just a comment, and looking at some of those long-term things and they can be fleshed out, I think, maybe that will be a theme in 2025. I expect we're going to hear some recommendations from the Ad Hoc Forest Committee for, opportunities for education that would involve collaborating, the city collaborating with other interest groups or interested citizens. So I think there's a lot of potential out there to, get our citizens involved and interest groups collaborating to increase awareness of all the natural resources we have in our community.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
Thanks, Tim.
All right, next on the agenda is item B. It's a presentation on wastewater treatment plant capital improvement project. It's an update. Mr. Anderson.
All right, well,
From
good evening.
Strand, thank you.
Yes, good evening, everyone. My name is Travis Anderson. I'm a project manager in the wastewater group at Strand Associates in Madison. And yes, tonight I'll be giving an update on the facility planning efforts for the wastewater treatment plant. If you go to the next slide, please. Outline of what I'm going to be going through tonight. Just a review of the alternatives that are being considered. The first 3 alternatives will be review, and then there's a new alternative to discuss tonight. Then I'll present on the rate impacts comparison of those alternatives, talk about how future expansion at the treatment plant might be accommodated and what the next steps are in the process. All right, so some background, kind of a refresher on why we are talking about this. There are some major needs for upgrades at the wastewater treatment plant. The majority of the infrastructure at the plant is more than 30 years old now and is at the end of its useful life. And the facility is also running into capacity limitations. There are always new rules coming out for surface water quality regulations coming down from DNR, including phosphorus regulations that need to be considered. And the city is growing, so that needs to be factored into any planning effort. The plant's also running out of room for sludge storage. And we've been considering the benefits of discharging to a larger receiving stream. So looking at the Crawfish River versus Rock Creek. And then we also need to consider the geographical constraints with the proximity to existing residences and commercial businesses. So a project, either major upgrades at the existing site or a new treatment plant will be necessary to continue providing wastewater treatment plant to the city. An alternative summary here, we've talked about options 1, 2, and 3 in previous presentations and information presented to the city. And then option 4 is new for tonight's discussion. So option 1 is to stay at the current site and continue discharging to the Rock Creek. Option 2 would be to upgrade the current plant, but pump the effluent to the Crawfish River, and that would allow for less strict limits on your effluent. Option 3 would be construction of a brand-new site with that discharge to the Crawfish River. And then a few months ago, Jefferson reached out to the city to explore the possibility of regionalization between Jefferson and Lake Mills. So that would be construction of a brand-new treatment plant outside the city of Jefferson. So what would happen in this scenario is that the current Lake Mills treatment plant will get converted to a pump station, and a 10-mile force main would need to be constructed to pump the city of Lake Mills wastewater down to that new regional facility at Jefferson. So we have had some discussions with Jefferson, and there's been some collaboration there to come up with a cost of what that might look like. So this table shows updated costs for the various options that I just went through. And these are based on 20-year projections based on population trends provided by the Department of Administration. So the options 1 and 2, where the city stays at the existing site, those options can be phased into multiple projects. They don't need to all be constructed at once. So that's why you see those separated into 2 phases and then a total capital cost in the bottom row. Option 3 for constructing a new site, it doesn't have an opportunity for phasing. It needs to all be constructed at once. And then option 4 also really doesn't have an opportunity for phasing. That would all, once you get the new plant built and the force main constructed, you'd, kind of flip the switch and you'd be pumping to that new facility. So you can see from a cost standpoint that there is a benefit to phasing the project, definitely from a cost standpoint, but also there's some other benefits as well. There have been some regulatory changes that could impact the benefits of discharging to the Crawfish River, and we want to make sure those are understood. As time progresses, there are the technology is getting better and better for phosphorus removal, so that could impact the decision-making process here as well. Just being able to phase a project gives you a better understanding of regulations that might be coming down the pipeline. And also, if you were to phase a project, that gives you more time to get more ratepayers as the city grows, which would then lessen the rate impact for future projects because you'd have more ratepayers to distribute the costs. Next slide, please. And those costs are higher than what has previously been presented to council. So I just wanted to provide some background on why that is. You're probably all aware that costs in the construction industry have been outpacing consumer inflation, and we've definitely seen that in the wastewater industry. I would say, the wastewater industry has never been busier. In Wisconsin and in our surrounding states. We've got multiple very large, greater than $100 million projects, both in progress right now and planned for the coming years. So it has become very common in the last year to only receive 2 bids on these large projects, and that trickles down to the subcontractors as well. So you have you have prime contractors bidding the project, but then they are also subbing out to electricians and plumbers, and the prime contractors are also only getting 2 bids in many cases, and that's generally increasing the overall costs. Some of the materials that are used in wastewater projects are at all-time highs, for example, copper. And there are also new requirements tied to the funding sources that are available, such as Build America, Buy America, or BABA. Maybe you've heard of that coming in as a requirement for upcoming projects. So in the past, just steel was required on funded projects to be sourced, through American sources, and now all manufactured goods on these funded projects will need to be, American sourced. There's also a shortage of qualified labor, which is lengthening the construction progress or project times. There's longer lead times. Insurance costs have increased significantly along with equipment. And this higher demand has also allowed contractors to monetize the risk of all these factors that I've gone through into their bids. So really a lot of factors are playing into this, but it's definitely occurring in recent projects that have bid that prices have increased significantly in the last 4 years. Next slide, please.
Hey, Travis,
Yes.
that last comment there, wastewater equipment has been the most stable. What does that mean?
So that means that out of all the trades that would be involved in constructing a new treatment plant site, it's actually things like pumps, blowers, things like that. Those have been more stable. It's things like concrete, steel, wire and conduit, motor control centers, labor, insurance, those types of things have been very volatile and have increased significantly.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Greg,
also.
may I also ask a follow-up question?
I guess I opened the gates. Go ahead, Lisa.
Just on that table that you showed, and then your comments about the reasons for the costs. If memory serves, it looks like the estimates that you're providing for option 3 are more different than option 1 and 2 than maybe what we saw a year or two ago. Would that be a fair statement?
Yeah, they've all increased, but with option 3 being a larger number to begin with, they've all kind of increased based on a certain percentage. And we've looked at the specific project components, but yes, you're correct. The dollar amount that they have increased is more substantial in option 3 than in the first 2 options.
Okay, thanks.
Mary?
And I have a question also about your observations.
Yes.
The technology between options 1 and 2, because it's on the current site versus building on a new site, are different. And so do these observations weigh more heavily or in favor of one build option versus the other?
Are you talking strictly from a cost standpoint or from a treatment standpoint?
Well, from the cost, your bidding environment, when you're looking at the observations that you've noted here, is there a shortage of qualified labor regardless if you're doing the new versus the old? Are these consistent amongst the 2 different types of construction? Or is this more to just building a new site?
It's more impactful on a new site because you've got just such a larger volume. You're starting from scratch, so you're having to put all new infrastructure in. So I would say the cost impact summary that I just went through would be more impactful related to the new site discussion.
Okay, thank you.
So those following from home, we're starting back on page 8.
All right, so, shifting gears into project funding and preliminary rate impacts, we'll continue to review this as planning progresses and through the design phase. But as it stands right now, the city's not eligible for grants through the Clean Water Fund or through USDA. So what we've assumed for the time being is Clean Water Fund loans, which which we assume will be available, but no grants. Next slide, please. A project here, as I mentioned, is necessary kind of no matter which route the city would like to proceed with. Just from a non-monetary standpoint, ideally, you could move to a new treatment plant site that would get the treatment plant out of the heart of the city, away from residences and businesses. But when we look at the size project and the price escalations that we've seen, the rate impact may be prohibitive, including the regionalization option. So, a final decision needs to be balanced between the flexibility that new site would give you and the kind of the non-monetary benefits of having the site out of the city versus the rate impacts. Next slide, please. So the option to mitigate that rate impact would be to remain at the existing site and to develop a phased plan, so 2 or more projects within the next 20 years for expanding on your existing site. And that way you can step that rate increase over 15 to 20 years rather than doing it within just a few year time period. But the needs at the existing site are significant. So, I mean, eventually you're going to be spending about the same amount for you to stay on your existing site as to build a new site. If we look over a long enough time period, you're going to be replacing everything if we look way out into the future. But you're able to spread out those costs over a much longer time frame. And there are some new technologies available that can help you out with that tight site footprint that you have. And that's really the purpose of the next phase, would be to determine the details of that phasing strategy and what improvements you want to do at what time. Next slide, please. So this table shows a draft rate comparison of a phased project on the existing site versus a new treatment plant site. And I just want to emphasize here that, this is not set in stone. This is really for comparison purposes only. These details will get ironed out during facility planning. And I've got some assumptions listed there. But you can see that the rate impact in the final column of a new treatment plant is significant and happens over a very short period of time versus, the rate impact of phasing on the existing site is less. And here I have it shown spread out over 15 years. And the rate impact for regionalizing with Jefferson would be similar. And, there is an economy of scale for merging with Jefferson and sharing common resources. The reason why it is in a similar cost to just building a greenfield site is that 10-mile force main. So that comes with about a $20 million price tag, and then you have to maintain it over its life, and then you still have costs at the current treatment plant site to convert it to a pump station, and then you have to buy into that capacity at the regionalized facility. So that's why the costs ended up being similar. If you didn't have that force main component, it would certainly be a lot less expensive than building your own brand new plant. So that's the reason.
Travis?
Yes.
Those costs also don't include any cost we'd have of securing easements along that 10-mile route, correct?
That is correct, yep.
So you have to pay to cross people's land typically.
Yeah.
That's just an additional cost.
Next slide, please. All right, this is just a graph showing population in relation to plant flows and where your current treatment plant is with respect to capacity. So that first box there showing influent pumping and screening, that lines up directly with your current population. So that is showing that your influent pumping and screening facilities at the plant are basically at their capacity right now with your current population. And then with just a little bit more growth in the city, you'll be at capacity for your final clarifiers and then some of your other pumping facilities. So there, again, this is just showing there is a need there for expansion. And the green boxes are just some examples of how commercial or industrial facilities will use capacity. So they're shown graphically here as population equivalents. So that food packaging facility is an actual industry that is in southern Wisconsin. I'm just showing it here as an example. And you know, obviously there's economic benefits of having these types of entities move into the city, but we do need to be able to plan for that in this facility planning effort. And then, you know, there's an example hospital shown there as well. Next
Just to
slide.
expand on this one, right, industry, there's been discussions by the city council about a desire for more employers, industrial development, commercial development, something that brings employment to the city. Without an expansion, we're not in a competitive environment in order to be able to accept a significant amount of sectors, if you will. So you've seen some of the development that's gone on in Jefferson, that they've been successful in securing. Obviously, our plant would be a significant hurdle to achieving something like that. So when we're talking about capacity, industrial growth, industrial use is going to have a much higher need than residential, right? So we upgrade the plant. If we only experience residential growth, you know, that 30,000 population equivalents, obviously, we're not likely to approach that over the 20-year period. But if we want to be able to recruit industry, jobs, we require additional capacity. So that is really what that's what will use up capacity, and there's some of the things that, you know, drive the local economy, but, you know, residential growth isn't necessarily what drive the need for additional capacity. But industrial growth much more quickly will eat up that population equivalent amount.
Michelle, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah. So I know that with industrial, it does impact that. And I want to also point out that it helps with like the cost overall, because
Helps
it's going to
ratepayers,
have
right?
benefit overall.
Yeah, it helps mitigate.
Yeah.
Both on the tax side, and then also high users will keep rates lower for your typical residents.
Right. And then my follow-up, well, kind of sort of follow-up question to that was, I'm noticing the phasing conversation, but that one of those options, there's not a whole lot of phasing because it's one and done. Is there an impact to the borrowing and levies by doing phasing versus?
No, our
Off-bounding?
ability to borrow is purely driven by our rates. So utility rates are backed by the rates that you collect, the amount of revenue you're bringing in. And in wastewater, the city has full authority over its rates. It's not a PSC regulated utility. So you will have to make sure your rates are able to sustain the amount of revenue you need to bring in to have borrowers lend to you. Mm-hmm. If you don't, we won't be lendable. No one will buy our revenue bonds in order to fund it. So when you see that rate schedule, that preliminary rate schedule he put up, that's the city approving that, you know, at each juncture, that you need to in order to maintain, I think it's $1.25 in revenue for every dollar of debt, I think, if I remember correctly. So you just have to maintain those ratios. So it's not debt capacity. The utility is not limited by the city's debt capacity because it's an enterprise funded project.
And don't we, as city council, see some of that rate increase and have to approve it, or is that?
You have to approve
Yeah.
every rate increase.
Okay, and then one more question, and then I'll give it to somebody else. And this is actually more toward you. As far as the Clean Water Fund loans, so I was doing some research, and I can't find, or not loans, sorry, grants. I couldn't find any information about Clean Water Fund grants. I found a bunch on loans, but not anything on grants. And I'm not finding a lot of information on grants at all. So I'm wondering what the Clean Water Fund loan would look like in terms of how does that impact the cost that we would have to
Well, it's a
accommodate?
low-interest loan.
It
through the
is a
state-
low,
Through the
yeah.
state of Wisconsin.
But like,
so
how
it's-
much do you think?
It would
that
fund
we
the whole
could-
thing.
Oh, that's nice.
Yep.
Maybe.
We're not eligible for because of income, largely.
Okay,
Same with rural development for the most part. Incomes we don't qualify.
because we make too much?
The incomes on a per capita basis are too high to
Okay.
qualify for the grants.
All right, I'm good.
Mary, did you have a follow-up?
Yes, I had a question. This chart made me kind of think a little bit about the capacity cap in context of industrial, and you mentioned it, Drake, about certain sectors of business that we can't handle or won't be able to handle. And if it's a can't handle now, do we need to actually have that understood and documented so that we, like a hospital as an example, is just out of scope today because by the time we get, I mean, it could be in 3 years or 5 years, depending on the timetable by which we get something in. Do we need to be more transparent about what types of businesses are not of interest given our capacity?
Yeah, so since we're in the process, I mean, we're sometime over the next 5 to 7 years, we're going to have increased capacity. So
Okay.
we are transparent with our utility needs when we receive requests for information or something like that through economic development organizations that we're members of. They often will provide you with the load requirements, and so we can very quickly see if we're competitive or not for something like that, and then we don't submit our information if we're not competitive for it. Wet industry right now would be what we would be at a competitive disadvantage for. Dry industry isn't going to impact to the same degree. So it depends who's looking and what their needs are. And there are companies, they can choose to pre-treat, and that can provide a capability for us to move more quickly. So if they pre-treat their wastewater before introducing it to the public system, that reduces the stress
to
on our
handle it,
system.
yeah.
So we would communicate that to someone who is interested, and we would let them know where we are in the process. But we can, based on the information they provide to us on what their operational requirements are, we can do calculations to determine if we are competitive or not.
Okay, thanks.
So those applications are pretty extensive. So for instance, railroads, we don't qualify for anything that needs a railroad.
Railroad.
So, is that wrong?
No,
Okay,
no, if you needed a rail stop, we
Yeah.
would not be competitive.
yeah. Yeah. All right.
Okay.
Any other questions? Continue.
So I've got just a couple more slides here. So
Thank
next
you.
slide, please. This aerial photo of the current treatment plant site shows how phasing might be accomplished. So the first two phases, they're a little bit hard to see here, but in orange and red, phase 1 and 2, that would cover the costs that I previously have been discussing in the slides. Phase 3 and 4 would be beyond the current planning period, but I wanted to include them to show how you might be able to accommodate further growth. Or, things change. DNR requires that we design based on the 20-year Department of Administration projections, but, like Drake was saying, if there is a need to accommodate other industries, we wanted to prove to ourselves that it would be possible to get that accomplished on your existing site, and that's what phases 3 and 4 are showing here. So just real quickly, phase 1 would address your most urgent needs, and that would be influent pumping, screening, and final clarifiers. And then phase 2 would likely focus more on sludge storage, and if you were to decide to pump to the Crawfish River, that would likely happen in phase 2. And then phases 3 and 4 would be purely driven by your capacity needs in the future. You do notice that the infrastructure does start to get close to the boundaries of the current site, and the construction gets closer to the mobile home park there on the south side of the aerial photo. That is one of the downsides that we've discussed in the past. But given the limitations of your site, it's just kind of an inevitable reality that you're going to begin encroaching on the boundaries of the current site. Next slide, please. All right, so if we kind of correlate this graph to what I just showed you, the bar in the middle there, the blue line pointing up at a population of around 17,000, that would be phases 1 through 3 of what I had just showed, and then phase 4 from the previous graph would get you up to about 30,000. That's not what I'm proposing that the city proceed with at this point. Obviously, that would be very costly and unnecessary at this point, but again, just kind of proving to ourselves that it would be possible on your current site. What would be designed would be in accordance with DNR requirements for your 20-year population projections and incorporating any known industries that are in the works here in the city. And next slide. So last slide here, this is just next steps. So I think really what we're looking for tonight is just some direction on which of these major alternatives should be evaluated further in facility planning. So if the rate increase is deemed prohibitive for the new plant or for regionalization with Jefferson, then we would develop a facility plan for phasing in improvements on the existing site. That facility plan would need to get submitted to DNR and approved, and then you would proceed with design of whatever project is decided on for phase 1.
I guess just to add to the end of it. So when you saw that rate comparison, you saw staying at the existing site had a lower overall rate increase on a user today, right, than building a brand new site. It was like 120 something percent to 230% overall. There's a growth factor incorporated into that. So you'd hit that 230% if we had no new ratepayers. So that's why you see that lower percentage, because the rates are being spread out among the growing ratepayer base over that 15-year period that we're making investments on. So I know that question had come up at an earlier meeting, so I just wanted to hit on that, is that the difference is that if you build a plant, everything right now, the ratepayers have to immediately produce enough revenue to pay for a $73 million plant. If you phase it in over time, there's more ratepayers being added to that each year, and so the rate impact on who exists right now is lower. The other piece of it is, what's your risk for staying at the existing site? You need to get 20 years minimum of life out of staying at the existing site. If in year 15 you have to move, then if you could have crystal balled it 15 years prior, you would have said we should just build a new site, a new plant on a new site now. Our projections lead us to believe that we will get at minimum 20 years out of a renovated plant, and that route is less cost prohibitive from a ratepayer impact. Under the new site, we would, at the end of that 5 years, at the end of that 5-year implementation of the rates necessary for it, we would be among, if not the highest rate utility in the state of Wisconsin. The existing site,
Per
obviously.
capita. That's per capita?
Average resident on a residence. So the average rate, the average utility bill on your typical residential use would be
Okay.
among the highest in the state.
Thank you.
That can obviously be mitigated if you get significant industry or something, but not to the extent that you're gonna see the savings on renovating at the existing site. The existing site does require the use of the newer technology because of the footprint. So right now, we're using oxidation ditches. We have room for only one more oxidation ditch. They take up a lot of space. If you were on an entirely new greenfield site, you could choose to stay with oxidation ditches if you wanted to, because you would have a lot of space to work with from then and then into the future. Oxidation ditches probably are not in our interest to continue with at this current site, which is why you've seen exploration of the aerobic granulated sludge, the AGS system, because it's a much smaller footprint to treat the same amount of waste that an oxidation ditch has. So that's kind of what we have been grappling with as we've been collecting this information, is the impact on ratepayers and the pros and cons of the increased flexibility that comes with a greenfield site, but at what staff believes is likely a cost prohibitive or ratepayer impact prohibitive option. So that's why you've seen the recommendation from, I believe, from Public Works Committee several months ago to stay on the existing site and renovate because of that impact on ratepayers and the ability to phase in the improvements over time and over a growing ratepayer base to reduce the cost on our ratepayers today.
I'd like to point out that population-wise, if we continue on the growth pattern that we have, the average of 2% growth per year, it's over the course of 20 years that we would hit about 10,000 people.
So you have
So,
to factor in industry.
yes, I know. I'm just thinking about just in general population, industry aside.
Yeah, in reality, people are not really what drives the need for additional wastewater
Right.
capacity.
No, we want industry to come in. I get that. I'm just putting that out there. True.
So we're open for questions? Any other questions?
Mr. Waters?
Yes, Steve?
Going back to your table on the phasing, the 17 million and 23 million phase two. I know last time we talked about this, you didn't have an inflationary formula built into that. Have you calculated that, or is it still based on today dollars for those phases?
Those costs are in today's dollars.
So if we saw inflation like we have the last 4 years, we could see an extreme increase in those phase costs.
Yes, that is possible.
It's likely.
So Steve, you're referencing the table on page 6?
Yeah.
That is correct.
Okay.
In my mind, I'm thinking, yeah, the one and done, you know what your costs are. If we go into the phasing, we're at risk of what our costs could potentially be down the road. They could go up considerably.
Greg?
Yes, Lisa?
Travis, I had a couple questions for you, Beck. This would be on slide 13 that has the aerial view of the existing site. Just a couple questions on that. So we're currently moving our yard waste center, which is shown between the red and the blue, I guess, on that aerial photograph. So does that area, is that area space that would be available for a future phase as an alternative to having the purple improvements going down toward the mobile home park?
So she's referencing the area between the creek and the road?
Oh, between the creek and the road, we don't have anything planned at this time, that's kind of a challenging area to build. So I would say that's more of a last resort for building tanks or buildings.
What makes it challenging?
It's just very narrow, and you've got the creek right there, which is always challenging to build next to, and setbacks from the road.
Okay.
Just makes for awkward construction.
So just not enough width, I guess, between the
Yeah.
road and the creek. And then I'm assuming it would have to connect to some of the other components in the line as well. Is that correct?
Yes, I mean, that's why in general, one of the reasons why this site is challenging with the creek running through it. Obviously you can only get so close to that. So I don't think what you're saying would be an issue for that for the city to use that space for something non-wastewater, at least for the foreseeable future.
There is available land on a substation that will be decommissioned in the future.
Yeah, that I would highly recommend to reserve for wastewater use in the future.
The only concern with that land will be the proximity to existing residences.
Yes.
Where is that located?
Okay.
Immediately
Is that
south.
on Tyranita Road?
Okay.
It's immediately south of on CP.
Oh, okay.
So it'd be below the picture that we're looking at on page 13.
It's nearly entirely decommissioned already, and the remainder of it will be taken care of in the short term.
But it's a pretty good size land, actually. It could definitely be used for wastewater treatment, so.
So one other follow-up question I had, and then maybe it ties to that idea as well. So what's shown in, it looks like purple to me, that phase 3, that would be the area that would be, well, and I guess maybe that final clarifier as well, would be getting closer to the mobile homes. Isn't there some kind of a setback that's required, and would what you've shown in the diagram, would that meet those building setbacks?
DNR has setback requirements for proximity to residences. They have basically said that the city is grandfathered in and that they would allow further expansion. But if this was a greenfield site, then definitely you would not be allowed to construct that close to residences. But in this case, the DNR has said they would allow it.
Okay, so would it be fair to say then, I mean, if we would proceed with a phase 3 the way you've shown it on this diagram, there wouldn't be any prohibitions from DNR in terms of the proximity. Now we still have to consider there would be impacts to the neighbors in terms of having those physical structures there, but it's not prohibited.
Yes, that's correct. You'd probably want to consider some screening or walls or, decorative fence or something like that.
Okay,
Yeah,
thanks.
I think it's something to consider as you're thinking about your options is, if we were starting from scratch, you would not consider the existing site for construction of a wastewater plant, but because it exists already is why it remains an option to you.
Yes, Mary.
I'm back on page 11, and I know you said this was somewhat illustrative. Maybe the assumptions aren't all, kind of baked in here. The project costs don't have inflation. I know Steve is even thinking about that as well. And I was thinking about the word that you used in your conclusion about how to determine or making a comment that the rate increase would be prohibitive. And so it would be helpful, and I was doing a calculation on my own to think about this on an annual basis. There are a lot of reports that still suggest that the average American can't afford a $500 car repair. And so it doesn't take long although I think strategically and long-term, a new wastewater treatment plant would be always in the best interest, given, all things considered. But the impact on the rate, just trying to think of it on an annual basis, you hit 500 in just a 2-year period based on this model. And I think this is probably I think these look low to me, given the assumptions. If I'm thinking this might be best case scenario. That's just something that might be helpful, is to think about it in terms of annual. And then, do we know of anything over the course of the years we'd be implementing that is rolling off by which ratepayer may see a decrease, so that your overall may not be impacted. So think of it like an integrated plan, rather than just looking at it at wastewater treatment level. Is there any way we can have it modeled at a city level or ratepayer level to suggest that other things may counteract these increases? I think would be of interest to understand.
Yeah, I think, projecting out decreases is difficult because we will have other improvements along the entire 20-year span. Lift station improvements, the infrastructure in the town of Lake Mills, which we were required to take over in the 90s, is going to need significant investment over that 20-year time period. Lift stations are aging. I think from a rate impact, this is from memory, Travis, so I might be wrong. I believe our average monthly is around 58 right now. And I think, at a new site, we would be in excess of $130 a month on your average bill.
Yeah, you're gonna go from about 50 to 150.
Right, and that's over a 5-year period. So after you hit 5 years, everyone's stable by this chart. And so what is the impact, that's what I'm thinking, in the next 5 years, if we could understand, is there anything that would give any reprieve on the ratepayers' dollar, their bank account, that may make this look less challenging? Because once you hit the 155, I know there's going to be changes. This isn't realistic that it's going to be flat for the next 11 years. But again, just trying to think through this particular projection, it would just be interesting if there was anything that would give us an aggregate view to help understand if we could make it happen without it being so large. This is really, you say prohibitive, you hit the 500 in 2 years, which doesn't feel like it'd be really challenging, I think, for people.
Yeah, maybe the best we could do is we could, as the city would grow, you'd have more ratepayers. So maybe you would see some lessening as that gets spread out amongst more ratepayers. So you might see some relief there, but it's going to be a 20-year loan. So at the end of year 5, when everything's constructed, you have 15 years to go until that debt's been paid. And I don't know, we could try to run some modeling on it, but I don't know if you're gonna see significant relief anytime along that 15-year period. That's going to change substantially your calculation if you're looking at it from a ratepayer perspective only, because all of the benefits that you're going to see that would impact a reduction in rates on a greenfield site are still going to occur on the phased-in approach. So you'll see, you would continue to see ratepayer growth on the phased-in approach as well. So maybe that delta shrinks a little bit since we didn't model out after that 5-year rate increase. If we didn't have, you have to model out just how that project is affecting rates and not necessarily and all future projects over the next 15 years, just how that debt is being paid for. And your portion of that debt would shrink as new ratepayers are brought on. So I guess if nothing else was done, right, your burden would lower as more ratepayers were added. But that would be true of the phased-in approach. It is true of the phased-in approach as well. So we could brainstorm some ways to try and model out further for you, but I'd say any benefit to ratepayers over a longer period of time to lessen their cost associated with this debt is going to be true of either option.
I was just looking at that first 5 years on the new one. That's the pain point. And then there's then it's like, this is how it's going to be. And it'll be small, moderate, you've got your normal rate. And then your normal stuff kicks in. So it's that cliff from the 60 to 155 that is most bothersome. And so if there was anything over the 5-year period where a ratepayer, rather than going from if everything was all aggregated, would there just be something that would make it have less of a steep slope all in?
our greatest opportunity would be
That's-
some kind of partnership with a corporate or industrial entity that is not currently utilizing our wastewater treatment plant, that would partner with us to offset
Okay.
a portion of that capital cost in return for us allowing them to introduce waste into the system.
Still have a question, Michelle?
I have a question,
I'll get to
probably
you
for
next, Lisa.
you. Sorry, Lisa. So I'm noticing the phases 1 and 2, an existing wastewater treatment plant. There's about a $7 million difference between option 1 and option 2, but that's not necessarily indicated on this table. So is it just so insignificant that it's not worth really reporting, or is there a difference? Because what I remember is the reason why we wanted to be using crawfish was because we were having an increase in our capacity and the Rock Creek wasn't able to keep up. So by using crawfish, obviously that increases the cost, it looks like by 7 million-ish. But does that change what this impact, or how the rate changes at all?
Yeah, the discharge to the crawfish would benefit from not having the strict phosphorus limit, and very likely reduce the impacts of future regulations as well, just because the small creek's always going to have more strict limits than the river. So this graph here, I believe, is showing the first option without crawfish river.
Which one are you looking at? I'm sorry.
I'm looking at the rate comparison table.
Oh, okay, just making sure.
So it would be similar for option 1 and option 2 would have similar rate impacts.
Okay,
It's not going to change dramatically. Maybe another 15% or something like that.
We don't have to get to the crawfish now. So originally, when this conversation started, there were additional restrictions that we thought we were going to have to meet that the crawfish would alleviate, and those didn't end up materializing. And the crawfish didn't provide as much additional benefit as Rock Creek as it did originally. Now, that could change in the future, and nothing stops us from getting to the crawfish. We can still install that infrastructure, but as far as like an immediate need, we can meet our regulatory requirements by continuing to discharge to Rock Creek.
Yes.
okay, that's good to know. Thank you.
Yes.
Lisa? You're muted.
Sorry, I had a different screen open. I couldn't get unmuted right away. Drake, you said something a moment ago that I thought was important for us to be keeping in mind. So this table that we've been talking about, and obviously there are some assumptions in here and it would need to be refined, but this would only be the increase in cost to ratepayers for wastewater treatment plant improvements, either at an existing site or constructing a new site, but it would not include things like next year, don't we have a lift station work at Sandy Beach Park, or, there's other maintenance and upgrades that we need in the system that I'm assuming would be occurring over time in parallel with whatever we're doing to upgrade the plant itself. So there could be other costs as well. Is that kind of what you're saying?
The rate impact you're seeing is only the rate impacted associated with the capital improvement project of the plant or the construction of a new plant. Other capital improvement projects throughout the distribution system may require additional rate increases. Increases in what we call O&M, operating and maintenance, wages, insurance, equipment, brake main repair, general, pipe bursting, replacement of existing pipe, replacement of infrastructure that is underneath of a roadway that we are reconstructing, lift stations, force mains, gravity mains. I don't think there's anything involved with the system requires revenue, and so other projects that you're undertaking will require other sources of revenue that are not incorporated into what you're seeing today.
And some of those examples that you gave can be planned for, if we were kind of trying to look at how is the rate increase moving over time and try to soften some of those peaks if we desire. But some of those expenses we can't always plan for if there's a break or something like that. It's maybe a more urgent need.
I think it's likely we need to be in the habit of reviewing our rates more frequently than the city has in the past. I think it's likely the city council will see a rate increase proposed next year to begin saving for this future capital project to avoid to mitigate as best as possible spikes in those rates rather than gradual increases over time. So I think as we have a better handle on what projects are coming up in the future and what wastewater specifically, capital projects we need to do, we can, plan for those over a period of years. But we do have aging infrastructure. We have, infrastructure that's certainly 75 years old, some higher than that. We don't know what, we believe there is a mandate coming for the elimination of lead laterals and lead services. We don't know if there will be corresponding revenue coming with that as there was in past years, so we don't know if it'll be a funded mandate or an unfunded mandate. It previously was a funded mandate, and we made a lot of progress in replacing those lead service laterals, but there are others, and the revenue, the grant funding, no longer exists to fund those. So if the directive comes down from the state or the federal government that these need to be replaced by a certain deadline, that could be partially on the city and then partially on the private property owner as well, that we have to remedy that situation. So there's a lot. What you're looking at only incorporates this project. There will be other wastewater related expenses over this time period that will also be required to be funded.
Yes.
Thank you. And then I had one other question on back on that aerial map on page 13. Travis, I think you have a note on the side that said phases 1 and 2 are based on 20-year DOA projections. So if I'm understanding that right, you're saying that's the work that we would expect that we would be doing and would need to do in the first 20 years. So is it possible that 20 years from now, we'll be saying, okay, maybe now is the time to, assuming we decide for the short term to expand on the existing site, maybe 20 years from now, would it still be a possibility that we'd be looking at doing a new plant because of, whatever has changed in that 20-year period?
Yep, absolutely. I would say, 20 years from now, when you're doing the next facility plan, you definitely want to have that on the table.
It could be a second plant too, right? You could operate two. It's certainly a conversation for the council to consider. Strategically, does the city acquire property in an area that would be optimal for a future wastewater plant? If it's available, I think that's a conversation the council can have. So that in the future you've identified where additional capacity could be met. So that's a conversation we can have in the future.
I'm going to step in here real quick. I think that Public Works, what's on page 11, the table that's on page 11, this was an eye-opener for Public Works. They recognize that we need to do something with wastewater treatment, and the time's coming quickly. When you look at this table, you can see the amount of savings by phasing it would have on the residents of Lake Mills. I mean, just looking at year 5 and looking at what's on the table for 2029, that difference is like $900 difference for each resident. Not each resident, but each household. And that's significant. And I think if you look at the cost throughout the 20-year period, it would be pretty overwhelming. That would be a large dollar amount. And it's not that hard to figure this out. I just didn't have the time to do it quite yet. But the savings to go with the phased is really what convinced the Public Works to make this recommendation that they made, must have been 3 or 4 months ago. But anyway, I guess we're looking at how do we move forward and where do we go from here? Yes, Steve?
I guess that was going to be my question, is how do we move forward? Because I believe we've already taken a vote on this once, what we were, kind of the direction we wanted to go. So are we looking at revoting or changing what we did here a little over a year ago?
Yeah, I think if there's, tonight, obviously, you don't need formal action, but,
Can you turn your microphone on, please?
Yeah, can't hear you.
Sorry. Obviously, tonight, there won't be formal action, but general direction on, where should we prepare a task order for, which way, and then I guess I'll need to consult with the city attorney on if we want to do a formal rescinding of the council's original motion that it approved. I don't know that it's necessary because of additional information that's in front of you. If the findings of fact have changed, I believe you can adopt a new direction without formally rescinding. If you need more time to discuss, I think Steve had a good point. A high inflationary environment can change the calculus. I don't know if it's enough to change the calculus as far as, meeting the cost and rate impact of the existing site, but it is certainly a factor. We don't know that the industry will stabilize. And so 10 years from now, when we're doing a phase 2 or a phase 3, you could have drastically different numbers than you're seeing in front of you today. We don't know. Where we'll be required to source. Buy America is certainly one impact. Tariffs are another impact. General inflation is another impact.
Technology change in the
Technology changes. There are unknowns.
Yeah.
And so it's. I know the table certainly shows a clear picture, but that's only a snapshot in time that we have right now that we're trying to show you. So. I think it's a point well taken that building everything now creates certainty. Staying at the existing site, we believe will have savings from a ratepayer perspective, but there is an uncertain element in that projection. So I guess that's a long way to answer your question, Steve, is I think at a future meeting, we would need a new vote. Whether the council wants to rescind its previous action, you certainly are able to. I don't believe it's necessary to. And if there is general direction this council wants to provide so that we can prepare an accurate work order to begin the beginning stages of facility planning to move into the next steps, we can certainly do that. If you need more time, we can leave this discussion further on a future agenda.
Michelle?
First of all, I want to thank you for
welcome.
coming back, the third, fourth time? I don't know. But I know the last time you were here, we were like all discombobulated. Thank you for coming back and putting up with us and reiterating some options that we needed to hear again.
You're welcome. It's an important subject, so happy to be here.
And what I would like to propose, given I'm hearing what Steve said, I'm hearing what Lisa said, I'm hearing what Drake has said, and there's a lot of unknowns, and those unknowns are going to be one way or the other. I think unknowns are going to happen whether we stay at the existing site or if we build a new. One way or the other, it's just, there's just going to be unknowns. But what really stuck with me is similar to what Greg said, having to do with that, yes, it's a possible rate increase the way that it is, but we don't know if it's going to be that way, but we don't know what we don't know. But I really think that at this time, given the projection of 20 years and where we could be, and looking at the way that you built that, the table showing the graph, and that, you know, at 15,000 was where that hospital is, just as an example, and there's a lot of people in a hospital. I really think at this present moment, with the way that we are, it would be best to stay with staying at the existing site and building what we can right now. And then down the line, it would be advantageous to propose looking at building another site and using the current site as a pump station, similar to what option 4, what you mentioned with option 4, but not with the 10 miles of the force main. So that's my idea. I don't know if if we don't vote on it necessarily, but
We
that
can
would
draft
be-
a resolution with both choices for a
Yeah.
future meeting as well.
Okay,
Directing the staff to bring forward a task order of either greenfield redevelopment or renovation, expansion.
Well, I think since 2021, we investigated some of the technology, the granular, I'm not sure exactly the terminology, but the granular technology is a step in the right direction, allows us to do it on a smaller footprint. And it just seems to make sense to go in that direction. It's cost savings, and we can definitely get 20-plus years out of that, I believe, so.
Greg?
Lisa?
Yeah, I guess I'll just share a little bit of my thinking, and thanks, Michelle and Greg, for your thoughts there. I think we saw these numbers before, and now, you know, thinking through it again, to me, there's a dramatic enough difference in the cost to ratepayers between staying at the existing site and building a new site that I'm a little more leaning, I guess, toward staying at the existing site. The other thing that I guess I wasn't aware of until you mentioned this tonight, Travis, is that we don't have to construct a pipe to the Crawfish River right away. And I don't know if that's because of the multi-discharge variance that we have and the possibility that that would be extended. I guess I'm not clear on why. We'll still be fine for a while at Rock Creek, but that, I guess, was a little bit new information to me.
That's correct. It's due to the variance, so that's what's buying you
Okay.
time and allowing you to construct that in phase 2.
Okay, yeah, so that's good to know, and so then we can plan to construct that when it's needed versus, you know, needing to do that right away. There's lots of benefits to a new site in terms of, you know, doing the latest technology, maybe moving some of our other facilities there, moving our yard waste there. I mean, you know, there could be a lot of other benefits to it. So, you know, I still see those, but I guess I'm learning some things tonight that are making me feel a little more comfortable with staying at the existing site. And I guess just for the purpose of conversation, for option 4 that you shared with us, I would have a ton of questions if anybody thought that we wanted to go in that direction, like how is it going to be managed and what's the agreement between the two cities? And, you know, there will be a lot of stuff to sort out, not just the cost. So I didn't hear enough about that option to answer those questions, but I also didn't hear enough to make me feel that it was very appealing to us. So I'm not sure, Travis, if you, or Drake, if you're, you know, recommending option 4, that we continue to consider it, or if you just wanted to share what you've learned.
Yeah, I guess to provide clarity on that, staff is not recommending pursuing option 4. The loss of control over the system, of local control over the system, we believe should come with a higher degree of savings than what it was offering. So you're correct, an entire governance model would need to be created as far as how decisions are made regarding future projects, how decisions are made on what gets accepted. Our local utility would essentially transition to a distribution utility rather than a treatment utility. And then there's the question of who are the ratepayers now paying rates to? Because we'll still need revenue, but that plant will need revenue as well. Is there a commission, some kind of shared governance model? How is the representation on that governance model shared? How are the future needs of each community distributed, as far as if one community needs additional capacity but the other may not? How is an upgrade in the future borne out? So all of those things can be overcome, and all of those things have been in other areas that have regionalized. It's certainly more common in a more urban environment than in a more rural county like Jefferson County, but it has been successfully done. So all of those things can be overcome. But when you look at the costs associated with the partnership, we could construct our own brand new plant at a marginally higher cost and retain full local control over that, and not have the operational and maintenance responsibilities of a 10-mile force main that we need to secure easements for. So no, staff's recommendation, barring a change in in our costs associated with it, is not to pursue option 4 at this time.
Any other questions on option 4? Why don't we do a quick show of hands on option 4? Let's eliminate that one. All in favor?
Of eliminating it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's not a vote.
that's 5, so it's elimination. Can we do that?
Straw poll.
Okay.
It's not a formal vote.
Right.
Yeah, go ahead.
I have 2 questions. Can I just have clarification on if we were to build on the new site or upgrade on the current site, what is the expected life expectancy of this new technology on that site? I'm hearing 20 years, but I'm not sure 20 years was more related to something earlier in the slide deck, or is it, we think this technology will only work for us for 20 years? I
So
wanna make sure.
the upgrades would be designed to accommodate the flow projections for the next 20 years.
Okay.
Your infrastructure is generally the concrete infrastructure, the piping is going to last longer than 20 years. But you often hear the 20-year term thrown out because that's what DNR requires for a planning period. They actually don't let you do less and they don't let you do more. The planning period has to be 20 years for wastewater facility plans. So that's what we use for flow and load. So there's infrastructure that's going to last longer than 20 years, but generally they want you to do a new plan every 20 years.
Oh, okay, well, that clarifies. Because I was going to ask the question, if we did a brand-new one, would that be 40 years? And so, because I have this a little bit of heartburn on and hearing 20 years, but if it's governed in a certain fashion, that's fine, because it took us several years, almost, 4 or 5, to get this decision, which means we better in 5 years from now start talking about a new one again, or 10 years from now. You know what I'm saying? It just feels, because this is not a simple decision. The numbers are telling us something really big regarding the investment that needs to be made for something so important. I mean, you can't live without this. It's one of those necessary evils. And so I'm just a little bit of concern regarding if it's 20 years, only 20 years of a lifespan of some technology we're buying, I'm just concerned about the investment. But if you're telling me that's 20 years in the planning cycle, but the technology or the mechanics itself will last longer than 20 years is the intention. I'm hearing
Our
that.
plant has lasted longer than 20 years.
Yeah, that's
Many plants last longer than
Okay.
20 years. There is a likelihood that whether you build new or renovate, you stay at the existing site, that it will last longer than 20 years. We just can't project out further
Gotcha.
than that 20-year
Thank you.
period, and the loan will expire. You will have paid off your obligations associated with this project at year 20.
Okay. And then regarding this, building on the existing wastewater treatment site, I'm just curious from your point, Drake, and your team's perspective, what about it would give you heartburn or high risk or anything that would make you lose sleep at night regarding the point that if we
Staying.
made a decision here, what would be
Staying at
bothersome
the
to you?
existing site.
Yeah, because that's where I'm hearing there's, and I'm interested.
Further, I guess there'd probably be two. One we have more control over than the other. More stringent regulatory requirements by either the DNR or the EPA
Okay.
that we simply cannot meet because of the space requirements on the existing site. That is the worst case scenario. The other would be that a major employer opportunity comes up, or multiple employment opportunities come up over that 20-year, 30-year time period that, what am I trying to say here? In Jefferson, you've seen a lot of talk about, food and beverage processing, food and beverage industry, and it has been kind of declared as a niche, as a competitive advantage of Jefferson County, the region in general. Those are wet industries that can drive the need for additional wastewater capacity. Does staying at the existing site position ourselves at the best possible scenario to take advantage of those? No, because a new site provides the most flexibility to continue to expand, to continue to add capacity. What we need to balance is what's the likelihood of that occurring, because it will take us to a 30,000, at completion of phase 4, will take us to a population equivalent of 30,000 people. At the end of that 20-year planning period, our population, actual people, is not going to be approaching 30,000 people. So you could say you have 20,000 or 15,000 of population equivalents to add industry to. So that is a concern, less of a concern than mandated regulatory requirements that at year 11 require us to move because we can't meet them. What is the likelihood of that? We've had this phosphorus requirement now that came down in what year from the state?
2010.
And then 2010, they said we had to meet it by 2025. And they've given us at least one extension, and we likely could get another one into the mid-2030s. So it hasn't been their past to require immediate compliance with new regulatory environments immediately, but I can't guarantee you that they won't. So that's the most heartburn.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments tonight? Do you have enough direction?
Yeah, I think what we'll do is we'll bring forward a resolution with both options for staying at the existing site and constructing on a greenfield, and we'll have additional discussion and conversation at a
Future.
I don't know if it'll be the 7th, since we're gonna be low staffed towards the end of the year, but it may be the first meeting in February that we bring something forward to you.
Okay. All right, all good? Great.
Thank you.
Move on. Thank you.
Merry Christmas, everyone.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks.
All right, next item on the agenda is item C, Resolution 24-80. Misty, can you read that?
City Council Resolution 24-80, Conditional Use Permit Declarations and Findings, Nina Jacobson and Rena Lira. Conditional Use Permit for Alternative Cutting Plan and Fill and Grading on a slope greater than 20% within 300 feet of the shoreline. 109 Lake View Avenue, Lake Mills, Wisconsin, parcel number 246-0713-1143049.
If you don't mind, we'll go directly to staff comment. Mr. Evenson?
Sure. Good evening, council. I apologize for the late notice, but I'm going to ask that you guys table this. The reason being is we finally received the engineering for the retaining wall. That's going to be in close proximity to our right-of-way over there, and staff was not satisfied with the engineering. So instead of it being contingent, that's kind of what my thought process was, to have you guys approve it contingent on the engineering, but there's enough question there that we thought best bring it back with the staff approval and the engineer approval so you guys can get a clear picture as to what you're actually approving for the conditional use permit. So I apologize, but we should be able to get that to you in January.
So you're requesting a table to the next meeting or?
Hopefully the next
table?
meeting. There might be some back and forth with us and the contractor, so I would the next one or the middle of January.
I'll make a motion that we table Resolution 24-80 until staff have had a chance to resolve the engineering plans with the property owner.
Second.
All right, motion by Ms. Curler, second by Ms. Quidnow to table. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Ms. Schmager?
Aye.
Ms. Quidnow?
Aye.
Mr. Fields?
Aye.
Mr. Waters?
Aye.
Ms. Curler?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. All right, moving on, item D, Resolution 24-85. Misty, can you read that?
City Council Resolution 24-85, Joint Powers Agreement, County 911 Emergency System.
All right, thank you. Why don't we go to staff comment?
Not much to add here. Annual approval comes to you each December. Staff recommends approval. This is largely procedural.
All right, is there a motion?
I move to move forward Resolution 2485, Joint Powers Agreement, County 911 Emergency System.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second.
I was trying to give them a chance.
All right, motion by Mary and a second by Michelle on Resolution 24-85. Any further discussion?
Yes, I have a comment on the actual, no, I got to navigate to it. The actual resolution, I was wondering if the date, it says, on item number 1, it says effective as of January 1, 2024. And I'm thinking that should be 2025.
You're correct.
But I just want to double check. So I'm fine approving it with that change, but it looks like Sheriff Mays may need to re-sign then.
I believe you're correct. It is the template that they send us.
Good catch.
It would be, I believe, considered a Scrivener's error. So you can approve it as it is, and if that is the case, it could be corrected after approval.
So if that can just be, if we don't need another
So no need for a
motion to
amend.
correct that Scrivener's error, and maybe that can just even be done by hand.
You can
However
acknowledge
want.
it in your motion that it's a 2025 agreement.
Should we just do a motion to amend? Does that make?
You need a motion to amend, just clarify your motion.
I would just make a motion to approve Resolution 24-85 for the 2025 calendar, the Joint Powers Act for 2025.
Are you good with that, Mary?
So, yes.
Are you good with that, Michelle?
I'm good with it.
All right, thank you. Any further discussion? All right, so let's have a vote. Roll call on Resolution 24-85, Jefferson County 911 Joint Powers Agreement, effective 2025.
Ms. Quidnow?
Aye.
Mr. Fields?
Aye.
Mr. Waters?
Aye?
Ms. Curler?
Aye.
Ms. Schmager?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is item E, Resolution 24-86. Misty, can you read that resolution?
City Council Resolution 24-86, establishing fees for operation and use of Rock Lake Cemetery, Lake Mills, Wisconsin.
All right. I see staff coming to the podium, so let's go right to staff.
This is the proposed 2025 increases from Meitner's Land Services for contracted services for the cemetery for 2025. Meitner's each year provides us, or upon request, reassessments on their fees for contracted services of the cemetery. These are the proposed fee changes for 2025. Are there any questions at all? Greg, I noticed you had a few questions prior as well. What you're seeing here is specifically just the contracted services costs. There are additional city fees that are associated with some of these services. I can go through any questions that you may have on the differences between the 2023 approved recommendation or approved resolution versus the 2025.
Thank you, Eric. So what you're saying is there's a different retail price essentially?
Correct.
Okay. And then when it says for the Saturday burials, it's $20 extra, or excuse me, $200 extra. It's actually $200, correct?
Correct. So if we look at the 2023 charges versus the 2025, it was previously $135. To make the clarification, it is now $335, or not $335, it is $200 total. So it is not an additional $200 on that $135.
Okay.
The entire cost is $200.
So the same thing for Sunday and holidays would be
Correct.
$300 is the new,
Yep. It is not additional to the 2023 charge, that is total.
and the same for the funeral involved departure after 3 p.m.
Correct.
Okay. Yes.
I'm calculating this about an 80% increase in 2 years. What do they have to say about that?
In Meitner's actual letter that was attached within the agenda
Yeah.
itself, it's associated fees with cost of operations. It is difficult for them to continue these operations. We have looked at, as well as the cemetery sexton, has looked at other contractors to provide the service and compared and contrasted the cost for it. Meitner still retains to be the cheapest and most reasonable within the area in regards to these services.
Okay, because that looks like a pretty significant jump in just 2 years. So I know that there's been increase in costs for construction, and I don't know if that has anything to do with it, but I just feel like that's quite a bit of a jump. You know, if you're paying for or if you're paying for services 2 years ago, you're saving a bunch of money if you died 2 years ago versus if you died next year. It's like, that's a terrible way to put it, but that's what I'm saying is it's just a huge jump in fees.
And we did a
So-
formal RFP not all that long ago in 2022, I believe.
Correct.
And I believe we only got, Meitner's was the only bid on it.
Oh.
So it can be, costs have certainly increased. It can be a competition thing as well. Most of their costs, I'm sure, are going to be labor related. So wages and insurance, costs of insurance, similar to other services that the city utilizes or provides. But it was not all that long ago, we went through a formal RFP process and we did not have other options available to us.
Okay, well then,
It's a statutory requirement that we
Yeah.
maintain the cemetery, so we don't have a choice but to do so. I agree, it is a significant increase, you're not wrong. Our options are limited.
yeah. Go ahead.
I agree. It's a significant increase and it caught my attention. But just referencing my own personal experience, just 2 weeks ago, these are reasonable compared to other places. So these were not, would have noted the 2023 were very low. And so these more in line with what I've experienced recently.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry you had to deal with that.
Different community, but this was more in the ballpark of what we had today. So-
Okay.
Cemetery sexton Greg McFarland has researched other private and municipal ran cemeteries within the area. These are very comparable or reasonable service charges comparatively.
Well, like you said, statutorily, we don't really have a choice, and if there weren't very many other options, we don't have a choice. But that's fine. I just felt like it was a huge jump. That's all.
So back to that retail question, we'll see some revisions on the retail side coming soon then, or what's the expectation there?
In regards to the total charges for a resident to actually have, we're proposing to have some reassessed fees for the 2026 budget. Does that answer your question? So are you asking the question, the entire charges that a lot owner would receive in performing one of these services or
Yeah, I
requesting one of these
imagine with
services?
type of prices, we're going to have to charge more on the retail side?
Correct, yes. So we're proposing to have adjusted fee schedules proposed for the upcoming budget or within the upcoming budget.
For 2025 or 2026?
26.
Okay. So we're eating it for 2025 then?
Well, the budgeted revenue we have in the 2025 budget, it is reflective of the revenue that we expect to bring in on it. So we certainly could have the conversation sooner than the 2026 budget and amend the 2025 budget to reflect additional revenue from the increased fees. We could certainly do that. We were going to pursue it in the 2026 budget cycle.
Considering the increase in costs, I think we should take a look at the retail costs sooner than later.
Sure, we will bring you a separate item in the early part of 2025 with what other fees exist and what we might increase them to based on the costs we're experiencing.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. So we need a motion.
I will make a motion to approve Resolution 24-86, establishing fees for operation and use of Rock Lake Cemetery in Lake Mills, Wisconsin.
Second.
All right, motion by Mary, second by Steve. Any further comments, questions? Thank you, Eric. Appreciate the recap, and I'm sure we'll see you soon. All right, can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Fields?
Aye.
Mr. Waters?
Aye.
Ms. Curler?
Aye.
Ms. Schmager?
Aye.
Ms. Quidno?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
All right, thank you. Next on the agenda is recommendations for future agenda. Floor is open.
You will have, so as Lisa had mentioned earlier, on the 7th, you will have a presentation by the chair of the ad hoc Committee for Urban Forest Management, closing out, giving you a summary of their work and closing out their recommendations to you. We also will have an item on the 7th. The library board at its most recent meeting formally moved to request that the city council place a question, an advisory referendum question on the April 1st ballot to seek the public's opinion on the city's commitment, or potential city commitment to the library construction project. So you're not being asked to make a commitment, you're being asked to seek the public's opinion, and following that vote then would be the council's choice on whether to commit funds. The motion was for $2.5 million on a $4.5 million budget. So the library will be present to present on the project. There will be information available to you as far as project scope, their capital campaign, their private efforts to secure funding, and other details. The council will have to act either on the night of the 7th or have a special meeting prior to January 21st. Referendum language is due January 21st at 5 p.m., so we can't wait until the January 21st meeting.
All right, anything else from staff?
No, sir.
Anything from council members? Ms. Curler, I think you wanted to be recognized.
Oh, yes. Thank you. Just before we adjourn tonight, I thought I would bookend Greg's initial opening to the meeting with my own thank yous. Here, we're at the end of the year, and I just want to thank all of our city staff for their dedication and service to our community from this last year. I also wanted to particularly recognize a couple of people who, one is left and one is about to leave, who are longtime city employees. Heather Crawford, who was our deputy clerk and worked in our finance office, had a new opportunity in the village of Marshall, and Lieutenant Brandon Cedarwall is going to be leaving after this weekend for a new opportunity in Economwalk. So just want to highlight those two, valued employees, worked for our city for a long time, and we wish them well in their future endeavors. And last but not least, my fellow council members, thank you all for all your commitment and dedication and the work that we do together. I really value our time together, and I wish you all a happy new year.
Thank you.
Nicely stated, thank you. Any other comments? Seeing none, the meeting's adjourned, thank you.